You hear it before you see it. A constant rushing sound like a river that never stops. You're standing in a neighborhood in the Esquiline district and there's a fountain built into the wall. Stone basin, lion's head spout, water pouring out. Always pouring, even at night, even in winter, it never stops. A woman fills a clay jug. A man fills a leather bag. A kid cups his hands and drinks straight from the flow. No one's rationing. No one's measuring. The water just comes, endless and cold, and no one questions it. You put your hand under the stream. It's freezing, which is strange because it's summer in Rome and the air is hot and thick and you're sweating just from standing here. But the water is mountain cold, because that's where it came from, not from the Tiber, not from wells. From springs in the hills 30 miles away, flowing downhill through stone channels, arriving here at this fountain in this neighborhood, free for anyone who wants it. This is Rome, 1 million people, and every single one of them has access to clean, cold water, not because they're rich, not because they're citizens, just because the system works. And if the water stopped, the city would have maybe 3 days before everything fell apart. You're still near the fountain, watching the rhythm of people coming and going. It's mid-morning. The streets are full. The Esquiline is one of the denser neighborhoods, insulated stacked 5, 6 stories high, leaning against each other. Most of the people who live here don't have running water in their apartments. No pipes above the first floor, so they come here, twice a day probably. Fill their containers, carry them home, use them for drinking, cooking, washing. Then come back and do it again. It sounds exhausting, and it is. But what's interesting is that it's not unusual. This is just how life works in Rome. The city doesn't bring water to you, not unless you're wealthy enough to pay for a private connection. For everyone else, the water comes to a central point and you go get it. But here's the thing, the fountain never runs dry. You can come here at dawn or midnight or the middle of the afternoon and the water is flowing. Always. That's not luck. That's engineering. You start walking, following the sound. Because once you notice it, you realize the sound is everywhere. Another fountain 2 blocks over. Another one past that. You can map the city by the sound of running water. And the more you walk, the more you start to wonder, where is all this coming from? You're moving uphill now toward the edge of the city where the buildings start to thin out. The streets are quieter here. And then you see it, an aqueduct. It's not subtle. Stone arches marching across the landscape in a perfect line, maybe 40 feet tall. It looks like a bridge, except there's no road on top. Just a channel. A stone trough covered, hidden from view, but you know it's there because you've heard about it. The water flows inside, pulled by gravity, moving downhill so gradually you'd never notice the slope unless you measured it over miles. This is the Aqua Claudia, one of 11 aqueducts feeding Rome by the 2nd century. It starts almost 50 miles away in the hills east of the city at a spring where the water comes out of the ground cold and clean. From there it flows, not pumped, not lifted, just falling inch by inch, mile by mile, following the contour of the land, carried on arches when the ground drops away, buried in tunnels when it doesn't. The engineering is subtle. The gradient is something like a 1% slope, barely noticeable. But over 50 miles, that tiny drop is enough to move millions of gallons of water every single day. And it arrives in Rome still cold, still clean, because it's been flowing through stone the entire time. No evaporation, no contamination, just water moving. You walk beneath the arches. They're massive up close, each one built to last centuries, and they have. Some of these aqueducts are over 100 years old. They've outlived emperors, wars, fires. They just keep standing, keep delivering, because if they didn't, the city would die. You're following the aqueduct now, tracing it toward the city center. It runs above the streets, sometimes parallel to the roads, sometimes cutting across open ground. People barely notice it. It's part of the landscape. But every now and then you see someone looking up at it and you wonder if they're thinking the same thing you are. What happens if it breaks? Because it does break. Sometimes earthquakes, sabotage, just age. When an aqueduct breaks, that section of the city loses water. The fountains stop. The baths close. People panic. Not immediately, but within hours. Because everyone knows the system is fragile. Everyone knows how much depends on that water keeping flowing. The state responds fast. Repair crews, engineers, laborers, specialists who know how aqueducts work. They're sent out immediately. The emperor's reputation is on the line. An aqueduct that stays broken too long is a political problem, not just an engineering one. Because people expect water, they've come to rely on it. And when it stops, they blame whoever's in charge. You reach a point where the aqueduct meets the city walls. There's a distribution tank here, a castellum where the water splits. Some goes to the public fountains, some to the baths, a little bit to private homes if you've paid for the privilege. The flow is controlled by bronze gates adjusted manually, redirecting water based on need. It's not automatic. Someone has to decide, someone has to prioritize. You're moving back into the city now, heading toward the baths of Trajan. It's almost noon. The heat is oppressive. The streets smell like sweat and dust and baking bread. And then you step through the entrance of the baths and everything changes. It's cool inside, not just shaded, actually cool. The air is damp. You can hear water everywhere. Splashing, dripping, flowing. The sound echoes off the high ceilings. The baths are huge, massive. The baths of Trajan can hold over 1,000 people at once. At once. Right now it's maybe half full, but that's still hundreds of people. All of them here because entry costs almost nothing. A quadrans, a single tiny bronze coin. Sometimes free on certain days, sponsored by the emperor. You move through the cold room first, the frigidarium. There's a pool in the center big enough to swim in. People are lounging on the edges, talking, laughing. The water is clear. You can see the bottom. It's fed directly from the aqueducts, constantly refreshing. The pool never gets stagnant because new water is always coming in, and the old water is always draining out, into the sewers, into the Tiber, back into the world. Next is the warm room, the tepidarium. The air is thick with steam. It's harder to see. People are sitting on stone benches, sweating, scraping oil and dirt off their skin with curved metal tools, strigils. Slaves are moving through the crowd, offering towels, massages, drinks. This isn't just about getting clean, it's social. It's where you see people, hear news, make deals, kill time. The baths are the closest thing Rome has to a public square, except you're naked and wet. The hot room, the caldarium, is almost unbearable. The floor is heated from below. Hypocaust system. Hot air from furnaces circulates under the floor, warming the tiles until they're almost too hot to stand on. People are sitting in hot pools, sweating, enduring it because it feels good in a punishing kind of way. Because this is what Romans do. This is part of the rhythm of the day. But here's what gets me: the scale of water this requires. The baths are open from morning until evening. Thousands of people pass through every day, all of them using water, bathing, swimming, sweating, washing, and the water never stops. The pools stay full, the steam stays thick. The system just keeps delivering. You're outside the baths now, walking through the streets, still damp from the steam. You're thinking about the volume: 11 aqueducts, some of them 50 miles long, all of them flowing constantly. And you start doing the math in your head, rough, approximate, but close enough. Rome is using something like 300 million gallons of water per day, maybe more. That's about 300 gallons per person, per day. In a world where most cities are rationing water, where wells run dry, where rivers are polluted, Rome is drowning in clean water. And most of it isn't even for drinking. The fountains account for some of it. The baths account for a lot, but the biggest use, what surprised me, is just flow, constant flow. The system is designed to never stop. Water flows into the city, flows through the distribution network, flows into fountains and baths and private homes, flows into the sewers and flows out into the Tiber. It's not recycled. It's not stored. It just moves constantly because that's how you keep it clean. That's how you keep it from stagnating. Stagnant water kills. The Romans know this, even if they don't know why. They know that standing water breeds disease, that wells in the city are dangerous, that the Tiber is filthy. So they built a system that never stands still. A system where the water is always moving, always fresh, always cold from the mountains, and it works. Rome doesn't have cholera outbreaks, not like other cities, because the water supply is isolated from the sewage system. The aqueducts bring water in from outside the city. The sewers take waste out. The two never meet. It's genius, even if they didn't design it that way on purpose. It's just good engineering applied at scale. You're walking south now toward the river. The streets slope downward. You can feel it in your legs. You pass another fountain, another group of people filling jugs. The rhythm continues. You're thinking about what happens in cities that don't have this. Cities that rely on wells or rivers or rainfall. They ration. They limit access. They build social structures around water scarcity. You fight over it, you control it. Water becomes power, but Rome doesn't have water scarcity. Rome has water abundance, and that changes everything. It changes how the city is built. It changes where people can live. It changes public health. It changes class dynamics because even the poorest resident of Rome has access to the same water as a senator. Not the same access. Senators have private taps in their homes, but the same quality. The same cold, clean mountain water. You reach the Tiber. The river is wide here, brownish-green, full of boats, barges unloading grain, smaller vessels ferrying people across. The water looks murky. You wouldn't drink it. No one drinks from the Tiber. That's the point. There's a sewer outlet here, the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer. It's an arched tunnel big enough to walk through, and water is pouring out of it into the river. Not just water, waste, runoff from the streets, drainage from the baths. Everything the city doesn't want flows into the sewers, and the sewers flow into the river. The system is simple. Gravity pulls everything downhill. The aqueducts bring water in from the high ground. The sewers take it out to the low ground. The river carries it away. The city stays clean because nothing stays still long enough to rot. It's not perfect. The air near the Tiber smells foul. The river is polluted, but the pollution stays in the river. It doesn't seep into the drinking water. That's the brilliance of it. The separation, the flow. You're moving back uphill now, heading toward the Aventine. Your legs are tired. It's afternoon. The heat hasn't broken. You pass a public latrine, a row of stone seats with no partitions built over a channel where water flows constantly underneath. People are sitting, talking, doing their business in full view of each other. It's communal. It's normal. The water carries everything away into the sewers out of the city. You stop at another fountain. This one's in a small square surrounded by shops. A baker. A tavern, a place selling clay pots. The fountain is the center of the space and people are gathered around it, talking, resting, filling containers. You fill your hands and drink. The water is cold, sharp. It tastes clean, mineral, alive. You think about the fact that this water was in the mountains 2 days ago, that it's traveled 50 miles to get here, that it's free, that anyone can drink it, that it never stops. And you start to understand why Rome calls its aqueducts a gift from the gods. Not because they believe the gods built them, they know engineers did, but because the abundance feels divine. It feels like something that shouldn't be possible. 1 million people, all with access to unlimited clean water, in a world where most people walk miles to a river and hope it's not poisoned. You're on the Palatine Hill now, looking down at the city. From up here, you can see the aqueducts cutting across the landscape. You can see the density of the city, the way it sprawls in every direction. You can see the Tiber snaking through, brown and wide. And you can hear it, the constant sound of water, fountains, baths, sewers, everywhere, 11 aqueducts, over 300 miles of channels if you laid them end to end. Stone, brick, concrete, some of it underground, some of it soaring on arches that'll outlast the empire. And it's all designed to do one thing, move water constantly, endlessly, without stopping. Because if it stops, the city stops. The baths close. The fountains run dry. The sewers back up. People start getting sick. Riots start. The emperor gets blamed. The empire itself starts to crack. Water isn't just a resource in Rome. It's infrastructure. It's politics. It's the thing that makes a city of 1 million people possible in the first place. Without the aqueducts, Rome would collapse back down to maybe 200,000, the maximum you can sustain on local wells and river water. The rest would leave. They'd have to. The aqueducts don't just supply water. They enable empire. They make Rome the center. They allow the city to grow beyond any reasonable limit and keep functioning, keep feeding itself, keep staying clean. They're the reason Rome can exist at this scale, and the terrifying part is how fragile it is. The aqueducts work because gravity works, because the channels stay intact, because repair crews fix every crack, every leak, every sabotaged section. If they didn't, if maintenance stopped, if the empire weakened, if enemies cut the supply lines, the city would die. Not slowly, within weeks. It's evening now. You're back in the Esquiline near the same fountain where you started. The light is fading. People are still coming, still filling jugs, still drinking straight from the flow. The water is still cold, still endless. You think about the fact that this system has been running for over a century. That emperors have risen and fallen, wars have been fought, entire provinces conquered and lost, and the water just keeps flowing. That generations of Romans have grown up never knowing scarcity, never worrying about whether there'll be water tomorrow, because there's always water. The system guarantees it. But you also think about what happens when it doesn't, when the system breaks, when the empire can't afford the maintenance, when the engineers die and no one replaces them. When enemies realize that cutting the aqueducts is the fastest way to kill the city. Rome doesn't think about that yet. Rome just drinks, bathes, flushes its sewers, waters its gardens, fills its pools, uses 300 million gallons a day like it's nothing, like it's infinite, like it'll last forever. And maybe it will. The stone is solid. The engineering is sound. The flow is constant. But standing here, listening to the water pour from the fountain, endless and cold and perfect, you can't help but wonder, how long can something this good, this abundant, this impossible actually last? Rome doesn't have an answer. It just keeps drinking,